face speaking to us for a seminar, and it's Dr. Asplund. I don't know if some of you had him back in the early days, but he now has his PhD, and he received it from Boston University a couple years ago, and he is now a permanent tenure-track faculty member at URI. Yay. So he's going to speak to us today about sustainability, the art and science of fashion design for sustainability.
Thank you. Yes, and those of you who have taken any of my classes know that I do try to sneak sustainability into any and every topic I cover. It's long been an interest of mine, and is getting actually to a rather serious degree now. Not really surprising, of course, because it is a very urgent matter for our industry. And so basically what I'd like to do today is to basically give you two talks. The first half of today is going to be about that urgency and really what the problem means in many ways. And then I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think I have come to in terms of solutions. And I think where this may all be going. And there's perhaps, and I hope, a few inspiring things in there, and maybe a couple of surprising ones. But there are things happening in the industry that point to some solutions that are worth thinking about. I also might add that we have, of course, all manner of technological developments that are changing all this even as we speak. So one of the things that we might hope for is that 5 years from now, I will have been wrong about everything I tell you today. But right now, this is pretty much what we've got. So we'll work with it. But why 7 green gates? Again, those who have taken any classes with me know that I have this idea about a design process. I believe it is a process. It has about 7 steps if you line it up that way. And I'm going to show you at the end of today's talk the choices made toward ecologically friendly design at each one of those stages. So those are the 7 gates. Now, first of all, let's make sure we understand the concept of the ecological footprint. I'm sure this is a concept that's familiar to most of you, if not all of you. But just so that we have our terminology clear, what basically is staring us in the face is the need to minimize the ecological footprint of our industry and, of course, of ourselves as individuals and of ourselves as countries, societies, cultures, nations. And basically, when we talk about the ecological footprint, this is a measure of the bioproductive land that is required to sustain any given group or individual, actually. We could calculate our own ecological footprint. And basically, this is the amount of arable land on Earth that's required to keep you in the style to which you have become accustomed, so to speak. And this, in addition, is also the land required to handle the waste you produce. And as it says up there, a lot of that is the land that goes into dealing with your carbon footprint. So if you've heard the concept of the carbon footprint, that is part of the larger picture. But we're also dealing with water, resources, food, energy. In other words, how much land do we need? Now, there is a problem here. You may be familiar with this one. This is another one of my favorites. And that is that we are depleting our resources. We are eating the planet, so to speak. And all you have to do is look at these numbers. These are not the absolute latest numbers. These are numbers from a couple of years ago. This is the most recent reliable set of numbers. But you can see here on the left the available acreage on the planet. In other words, the amount of land available on the planet to sustain your average human being, whatever that means, is 5.2 acres. Now, right above that, you have the average environmental footprint of an inhabitant of the planet. You already see the problem, right? Okay, our appetites are larger than our portions. How do we do that? We do that, of course, by eating the future. We are depleting the source. We are eating the seed corn. We are raiding the larder. We are stealing from the cookie jar. Name a metaphor and you've got it, okay? The Germans going with about twice the rate of what the planet can hold. And, of course, the land of the free and the home of the brave, behaving as if there were no tomorrow. And there's your problem, staring us right in the face. We are eating the planet. We are eating it at a rate of possibly 4 to 5 planets worth. And the rest of the world is doing everything it can to catch up to that kind of lifestyle. So given the way we're working this right now, we are going to be winding up very soon at a crisis point. And if we are not there already, by the way, it's just hidden. We can't see it yet. Now, a couple of problems here. A couple of problems in that when you immediately start to talk about sustainability or green issues or eating the future or saving something for the grandchildren or whatever, the whole discussion becomes politicized, it says up there. And of course that it does suffer from a rather severe lack of clarity. So when we talk about eco-friendly or sustainable or environmentally friendly, we can be talking about any number of things. And these can be very surface skimming or they can be very deep, but often it's impossible to know which one you're talking about at any given time. Recycling your bottles and cans is environmentally friendly. Does it contribute to a sustainable world? Possibly in a very small way. Is that what I'm talking about right now? No. I'm talking about something that goes much further and much deeper. But that will hopefully become clear as we go. The term has unfortunately become a label, and there is a level of sarcasm that could show up right there, in that we are dealing with, of course, the labeling of things as green, when in fact they are not. But I'm not going to go into that discussion. That's an entire lecture in itself, the idea of greenwash. But just to get our terminology clear here, just going over a few bits. Then, of course, there's a whole other, here's lecture number 3. Linda, why don't we just do a lecture series? I'll just take care of the rest of the term. There's the whole idea that whose sustainability are we talking about? And this is Martin Byde's favorite point. Martin isn't here today, is he? No. What on earth are we going to sustain, and for whom? Are we going to sustain the average lifestyle of a Eastern Seaboard citizen of the United States, or are we talking about sustaining the lifestyle of your typical, I don't know, Indonesian, Mexican, sub-Saharan African? Whose sustainability are we worried about here? And judging from the diagram that I showed you just a moment ago, the interesting answer to that question is it's probably not yours, you see. And that's one of the odd things about this question, is that my generation, my parents' generation, I suppose I could start blaming my grandparents too, but I'm not going to. We've created a problem that you're inheriting. And your generation, with all due respect, is probably going to pass it on to your children, and then to their grandchildren. And that's probably where the, well, environmentally friendly stuff is hitting the fan, right? We've got another couple of generations to go. But whose sustainability is really the question. And if we look deeply into the material, into the matter, the fact that I mentioned Indonesians is not a coincidence. The Indonesians are living right on the brink right now. They are right there in the 5.2 acres per person lifestyle. So you should maybe go and see how Indonesians live, and then you can see how what we have to adjust. Right? Yes, and then the discussion has become politicized. Unfortunately, it's become a question of liberals versus free marketeers, or tree huggers versus something else. And as soon as you say green, you get labeled as something that used to be called a red, which is really interesting. So I just sort of throw that in. But anyway, sustainable what and for sustainable who? Okay, luckily we don't have to look at all that today. We're just going to talk about environmentally friendly or eco-friendly design, but I thought I'd just clean that up too. Now, let's take a look at a quick definition of sustainability. And this is the famous definition from the Brundtland Report, which is really the first time that something really serious was done about this back in the 1980s. And there was a UN commission that went over the matter, looked at the idea of what we are doing with our industrialization and our capitalistic methods, and what that's doing to the planet, and what we need to do about it. Now came this report, which generally is called the Brundtland Report, although that's not the title. It has one of those 7-mile-long governmental agency-type titles that nobody ever remembers, so it's just called the Brundtland Report. It has these two concepts, really. And the first is that, well, obviously the definition right up there, in that we have to meet the needs of the present without doing that whole thing of eating tomorrow's sandwiches all the time. Like, it's really tedious for the people of tomorrow. And then it has those two key concepts. First of all, these needs. So whose sustainability are we talking about? And notice they're talking about sustainable development, which is a little bit different. It's the idea that everybody should get to a certain level, right? That the ownership of the Earth's resources is not the sole right of industrialized nations. That's point number one, really, when you think about it. And the second thing is then that we are limited by our technology right now. And we probably always will be. And we may or may not have the social organization available to us to solve these problems. And the unfortunate conclusion there is that it kind of becomes everyone for themselves. If we all try and do our bit, we can probably muddle through. Because that hidden in that second point, and this is directly out of the Brundtland Report, is the rather sad fact that during the time of the report making, and in the time that has passed since, as any of you who have followed this stuff and noticed what has been happening at these Rio conferences, and if you don't, then go look it up, is that our present governments and present government structures seem incapable of dealing with the problems. So it's not, technology is not going to rescue us, governments are not going to rescue us. That's the sad hidden message there. Now, let's see. Another rather dramatic point, and notice I'm shoveling all the bad news at you here up front, right? There's a clear method to this depressing information, in that we really have to accept the seriousness of this. This is neither a cute nor pretty problem. This is a serious problem staring us in the face that is really going to land very, very hard on your children or grandchildren. And that's simply it. Now, why is it political? Part of the solution, part of the key, is in realizing why it's politicized. It's because it's about resources. It's about who gets and who has taken away from them. And we've gotten to the point now, in terms of our lifestyle, where we're actually starting to play defense. Goodness. We're starting to play defense, where the question is not who gets, but from whom will things be taken away. That's the way it has tipped now in the past, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years. There was a chance maybe when the Brundtland Report was written that things would be able to curve differently. But somewhere around the turn of the century, we tipped into defensive mode. And it's now a question of who gets the least taken away from them, I suppose. And that, of course, means politics, because politics is about the control of resources. Politics is about patronage. And do we seriously imagine that the current governments and corporations are going to give up things to the poor? Somehow I don't think that's really going to happen. So, my suggestion is, given that it's sort of every person for themselves, is that in terms of teaching design, in terms of instructing designers, we have to start taking responsibility. That designing is such a pervasive issue in our society, in this consumer structure that we have. Designers are really very well placed because every product that goes to this wild and crazy market that we have, it's very rapid turnover and it's incredible numbers. Everything goes through the hands of a design studio somewhere. So if the designers develop a consciousness and a sense of responsibility for the ecological impact of their products, then perhaps it just happens. We don't wait for the consumer demand, is kind of my point. We just start working on it as people in the industry. And the consumers just realize that suddenly, oh, this is what all products are now. Right? And the governments and the corporations and the free marketeers and the tree huggers and everybody just wake up one day to realize that the industry has taken charge. Now, is that an optimistic scenario? Well, of course it is, but you've got to start somewhere. And I think if we start by educating the designers, we're going to get very far, much faster. And we can't go much slower than the UN and the governments anyway, because that would probably mean we'd have to be either asleep or dead. But we're going to try it. So we try and aim toward minimizing the footprint. Of course, the only way to not have an ecological footprint is to be dead, because then you're contributing to the environment by providing nutrients to the soil. But if you are alive at all, you have an environmental footprint. But so you can minimize it. You can make it as small as possible, trying to leave as much